Okay, we're now live. What is going on, everyone? Special podcast here. I'm here with Jedi Derelict. Today we're gonna have a conversation about the Last Jedi. So I guess I'll let my guest introduce himself, where they can find you, and what do you talk about on your page?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. Very cool. It's the first podcast I've actually done for Star Wars, so I'm excited about that. Um, I My TikTok, which is Jedi Derelict, is is focused on, well, mostly Star Wars, but I also get a little bit into Marvel and just basically any sort of geek culture thing that I happen to be interested in at the time. Other than that, I'm also co-owner of a comic book company. That's something that I don't usually talk about very much. But so I'm usually at Comic Cons, around the Northeast. Myself, my brother, my girlfriend. We kind of go around. We talk to people. We sell our books and stuff like that. So, but on TikTok, I've put the focus on Star Wars and, like I said, Marvel and geek stuff.
That's cool. That's cool. So just to give like how I found you. So I happened to see one of my good friends, Choco, who I've been on his podcast once, and actually Choco and I, it's a really funny story. We met on TikTok over a disagreement, and I think I saw YouTube. We're going back and forth. Choco and I had a discussion about sexism and misogyny in the fandom and Ray
Right.
Skywalker, that whole conversation. So he's always been a nice guy to me, and I saw you two were going back and forth, and I saw some of his audience is not as I will say as kind, or they share some of the similar beliefs as him. I don't agree with Choco on everything, and but we've become really good friends, and we've had multiple podcasts together on his channel and my channel. So yeah,
Very
that's
cool.
that's really how I found you, and I was just generally interested in your perspective because on TikTok, it seems that it's very different than YouTube, the YouTube and Twitter culture, where the Last Jedi is, I wouldn't say universally hated, but it's not loved. I'll say that on TikTok. And these are a lot of great people that I met that
It
love
has
this
its
film.
critics, we'll say.
Right. Yeah, yeah, that's fair. But on TikTok, there's more of a general consensus of people liking the film, and I thought it'd be, generally interesting to have a conversation with somebody on TikTok who likes to critique the film, because I don't feel like a lot of people on this app specifically do that. So, I guess my first question to you is like, why why did you like to start to make critiquing videos of The Last Jedi? Like, did you have a friend tell you to do it, or did you just start making them and they started to pop off a little bit and you're like, oh, I got to keep making this content? So, like, how did that content like start for you, I
So,
guess?
I have always, like, Star Wars has been a passion of mine for, I mean, literally, I was born in 1978. So, literally, I was in my crib holding, one of the first Star Wars figures to come out. So, I literally have been born, raised, and bred on Star Wars. And it's always been, especially like the 3 and 3/4 inch figure collecting, I was really into, and in that community. And I mentioned before that to you that I also, me and my brother have a comic book company, so we do a lot of conventions, and of course at conventions there are a lot of Star Wars fans. I'm always talking Star Wars with somebody. um, I actually tried to start a YouTube page probably about 2 or 3 years ago. I made 1 or 2 videos, but I was never really good at video production. So when my kids and my girlfriend were on TikTok, and like I downloaded it, I started to notice that there were a couple of people who talked about Star Wars, and I was like, wait a minute, this is a place. It's a lot easier to make these videos. It's a lot more concise. I don't have to like really intricately script something out like I did on YouTube. So I just figured it was something that I could do here that was a little bit easier than going YouTube and going into full production mode.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's pretty much, I think, everyone's case. It's a lot easier, 1 minute video or 3 minutes or however long you want to make it. So I guess now I guess now I kind of want to dive right into some of the
Let's
videos you
do
made.
it.
I looked into some of your content, and I just want to say my thoughts on the film before we get into it. I am not the
Oh,
biggest fan of
absolutely.
this film either.
Okay.
I have a good friend who I do a podcast with twice a week. Talk about the Marvel shows and the Star Wars shows that are coming out, and he's a huge fan of it. We disagree on that film a lot, but
Right.
just by his love of it, and he's made me appreciate the film more. And I
Okay.
remember when I first walked out of the film, I hated it. I think like a lot of people did, a fair amount of people.
Hmm.
I just didn't like the direction that Ryan took it, but over time, I've grown to like the film. There's still parts of it I obviously don't like. I think it's important that I'm still critical of the media that I watch because that's the only way it's going to get better. So I still have my problems with the film, but I think the general problem I have now with the film is the points that people make. I think that they're flawed on both sides. And I want to acknowledge you made a really good video about how people on the side that love this film seem to have certain talking points. And I acknowledge that. I've seen that plenty on TikTok. And I've made that point even to my friends that who like this film that there's a lot of similar talking points.
I do think it's a two-way street. I think that
Right.
one of the reasons that I do as much as I do, because it's funny, you were talking about, how did I get into critiquing Last Jedi on TikTok, and really, especially if you go back, my TikTok has been devoted to Star Wars in general. What just happens to happen more often than not is of the topics that I'm picking to talk about. I just there's so much to deep dive in the Last Jedi that a lot of my videos end up being that content when I'm sitting down for the day and I'm like, I want to make a video today. What's something I can talk about? It happens to be one of the topics on my mind. And the result is that I've found um, is that a lot of people who don't like The Last Jedi, and you wouldn't know this on YouTube, like you kind of pointed out, but they don't like to vocalize their opinions publicly, or if they do so extremely cautiously. And I have found that a lot of people have been telling me, both in public and in my messages afterwards, that they really appreciate what I do because I articulate my points, I make my arguments, and I feel like I put them together pretty logically. And I state a lot of times what other people have problems putting into words. And oftentimes, and again, this is a two-way street. I'm not saying that there aren't Last Jedi fans who don't go after people, or I'm sorry, there aren't critics of the Last Jedi like myself who go after people who like it and say that they're not fans or that they're fake fans and stuff like that. I don't endorse that either. But there is the other side of it, which is oftentimes saying that you don't like the Last Jedi puts a target on your back. And I feel like I understand and am comfortable enough with the material and story writing in general that I can defend my points. So when people come at me, I'm able to articulate why I feel something a certain way and able to deflect some of we'll say, the tricks that sometimes people use in these kinds of fandom arguments. And I feel like I'm on the ball enough to recognize when that's happening and say, no, 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 like you're trying to like misrepresent what I'm saying, or you're trying to bring the argument in a different direction. It's the straw man, the logical fallacies. I'm able to recognize all that. So I feel like for some people, I've been told that, they love these videos because I'm saying what they wish that they could articulate better.
Yeah, I totally understand that, and that's why I wanted to talk to you because I think out of everyone I've seen critique this film, I think you're the best at it. I really
Oh,
do
thank you.
like. I really think that some of your points are interesting, and I think just the problem I have in general with Star Wars TikTok is when you get a person like you who will critique this film, a lot of assumptions are made,
Yes.
specifically negative assumptions, and maybe they come from a place of truth. Some of these people who don't like the film, I won't say a majority of people who don't like the film are sexist or racist. I don't think that at all.
Right.
But we'll say this, prominent people online who do have maybe those tendencies. So I understand where it comes from, but
Right.
like it's I could tell because I, to be honest, when I started my content was similar to yours almost, where I would be more opinionated, and if it didn't match what one side of the fandom wanted, it's a a back and forth, and that's what I appreciate about you. You like it seems like you like going to war with the fandom. That's not my type of content anymore, but yeah, just
What's funny is I really don't like going to war with the fandom at all.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't either, but
It's
like
actually it's not something I prefer to do, you know?
yeah, I totally get that. So I guess there was a couple of videos are a couple of points that you made that I kind of want to talk about, and I guess the big one with the Last Jedi where we got to
Sure.
start is the character of Luke Skywalker, right? So
Right.
uh, you talked a little bit about in one of your videos. You talked about how in Return of the Jedi specifically, Luke's arc is kind of dealing with the dark side. Correct? Am I not right about that? I think in one of your
Um,
videos you talk about this.
well, the way that I see Luke's character going through the entire original trilogy is um, he there's been a lot said about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? The idea that Luke embodies that arc almost perfectly, word for word, textbook. The way that was intended was to bring the hero's journey to a crescendo and end on him being essentially that graduated, quote unquote, perfect hero, which is what a Jedi is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the pinnacle of human achievement and beyond. Luke's final journey and his, I guess you could say, his Jedi trial, though that was sort of invented later and brought in the prequels. But the idea is, at least as far as I see it, that Luke's trial is facing Vader and overcoming that sort of uh, impetuous nature that he showed back in the cave, right? So Lucas was always very specific about how he builds these things. And the reason that in Empire Strikes Back we see Luke, he goes into the cave, and his vision that he sees in the cave, because he brought the weapon in with him, is he ignites his weapon, he attacks Vader, he cuts off Vader's head, he sees himself, and it's a reflection of what he could become. So that is mirrored in Return of the Jedi when he has the chance to kill Vader and doesn't, right? So you hear a lot of people bringing up the fact that, they mention this as a hole for Return of the Jedi. The fact that in Empire Strikes Back, Luke wanted to run off and confront Vader, and both Yoda and Obi-Wan are like, don't do it, don't go. But then when Luke finally returns to Yoda in Return of the Jedi, his final trial is, you must confront Vader. And it's not an inconsistency as I see it, because when he ran off to confront Vader in Empire, he was doing so very impetuously. He hadn't learned patience, he hadn't learned the control. His final trial as a Jedi is to face those flaws within himself and overcome them. So he loses it for a moment when he, hears that his sister's in danger. He fights Vader to a close, and in that moment where he could strike him down, he pulls himself from the brink, disengages the lightsaber, tosses it, and says, "No, you failed, Your Highness," because that is the moment that Lucas realized what his test is. From that moment on, he is a Jedi. And actually, it's ironic because the one who pronounces him a Jedi is really Palpatine. He says, "So be it, Jedi." To me, in that moment, and Luke saying, "I am a Jedi like my father before me," when he throws away, Luke realizes that he faced his final test, and he throws away the lightsabers like, "Nope, I'm a Jedi. I've done the thing I knew I was supposed to do." So, and even Palpatine at that point, like, he's done trying to turn him. He's like, "Okay, like, this isn't going to work. He's a Jedi. Now it's Jedi versus Sith. It's not just trying to turn him." So, as I see it, it's more, yes, it's fighting against the dark side, but it's also Luke fighting against the inner urges that would lead him down the dark path, more than fighting against the dark side as an external threat.
So his impatience, his attachment to his friends, his uh, he act Luke early on in the original trilogy acts a lot on emotion
Mhm.
rather than being calm and rationally thinking about things. Yeah, that I will acknowledge. So I guess let's go right into his character in the Last Jedi. So
Okay.
where do you think it goes wrong? Where do you think it goes off the rails?
So, in The Last Jedi, as far as I'm concerned, the characterization of Luke came from a very cynical place. I feel that Ryan Johnson to me seems like one of these guys who loves Star Wars, but thought that it was too hokey, thought that it was too old fashioned, too bright, too shiny. He was really interested in bringing gray into the thing. He sort of muddied up the waters with DJ and the whole like they sell weapons to both sides, no one's hands are clean thing. And the Jedi were no different. His view of the Jedi as essentially failures who power.
The Oh, go ahead. You cut out for a second. You're good now.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that the Luke's cynical view of the Jedi as failing at their height of their power. It seemed to me that what Ryan Johnson was trying to say essentially was that the Jedi of old were flawed and not as good as we think of them as, and he needed to sort of reinvent the wheel. Um, and to do that, basically, you have to have Luke realize that, oh my God, the Jedi were not as wonderful as we thought they were, which to me is a really cynical view to take. And Luke, as a character, represents hope. He always has. That has been the core of who Skywalker is as a character. To have that character act in a way that is so utterly hopeless throughout that film, to me, that's really where the misstep was. And I was fine with him having a crisis of faith. I was fine with him sort of going into the film and, being sort of the curmudgeon who didn't want to train Ray at first, who needed to be convinced. But one of the arguments that people make is that Luke came around in the end, and he did decide to train Ray, but he never does end up training Ray. When Ray leaves Octo, or however that's pronounced, she does so with Luke saying, "This isn't going to go as you think. I'm not going with you." Luke comes to a realization afterwards, after he has the conversation with Yoda, and he decides to go to Crate. But his final piece in that film is saving the Resistance. It's not. It's not passing on the Jedi Order. Ray did that, irregardless of what Luke was doing. Luke didn't impart virtually any wisdom onto her, at least not intentionally. And she sort of took the books and went and started the Jedi Order without his guidance at that point. So I think when I was watching the film, I was waiting for the moment that Luke would turn around and say, "No, you're right. The Jedi need to go on. I'm going to teach you what I know." And that point never arrives.
So yeah, I definitely get where you're coming from, but I want to first you talk a little bit about Ryan Johnson's point of view of the Jedi. Well, I kind of want to go back
Mm-hmm.
to The Force Awakens.
Okay.
JJ's the one that set up the fact that Luke was on an island by himself. Sure, you don't have to agree with Ryan's interpretation of the Jedi and Luke's loss of hope, but JJ kind of put Ryan in a box, if you really want to put it that way. He put him on an island. Like what could Ryan do with that character with Luke on the island? How could you explain that away that Luke was on an island and wasn't in action? JJ sets it up
Well,
for Ryan.
I think there is actually a really easy explanation that to me seemed intuitive, and it's one of the reasons that I was waiting for Luke to kind of turn around and spring it on us, and it never happened. Um, Consider this: Luke wants the Jedi to die. He is going to the island to die alone, but yet when Rey shows up, Luke is wearing ceremonial Jedi robes. Now I understand that the books later explained it, that he had some like last ritual he was doing and she happened to show up at that moment, which, you know, I know Star Wars is known for cosmic coincidences, but I mean, she happened to arrive the one day of the year that he's wearing Jedi robes just to have that dramatic meeting with him. Um, but you have to understand, he also went to the island of the Jedi Warrior, the first ever Jedi temple where the books containing all of the Jedi lore are kept. That, to me, doesn't scream, this guy wants the Jedi to end. To me, that puts Luke in the role of, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Hong Kong action movies, the chop socky martial art movies, but there's a character named Pai Mei. Look him up. He was in, if you've seen Kill Bill,
I
um,
have, yes.
okay, so the ancient master that Kiddo trains with, the guy with the
Right.
long mustache and he eats the fish
Yes.
heads. That character has actually been in a number of old martial arts movies. In fact, him appearing in Kill Bill was actually a big deal because it's like, oh my god, they actually took the Pai Mei character and put him in a modern movie, and it's like he hadn't been seen for decades. The character of Pai Mei was like the old wise martial arts master who lives on a mountain that you have to climb to in your bare hands, that sort of thing. And the idea is that he's there and he's waiting to impart wisdom to a worthy student. And when you get there, he's not going to treat you nice. He's going to make things hell on you because he's trying to get you to prove that you're worthy of his teachings. And the reason that he's doing that is for the same reason that Yoda tried to test Luke's patience when he got to Dagobah. He's trying to make sure that, like, is this person someone who's going to tend to the dark side if they don't get what they want right away, right? So to me, Luke wearing the Jedi robes and hiding on the island where the Jedi began with the ancient Jedi texts, to me, the intuitive way that story was going was that Luke was waiting for a worthy student, just as Yoda and Obi-Wan were. Just as they knew that it was going to take Luke coming of age and training to be powerful in the Force to unseat the Emperor. By the same token, Luke, the cycle repeats itself. They're rhyming verses, as George always said, right? To me, he was waiting on that island for a worthy student to show up, at which point he would test her, and assuming she passes the test, he can say, hey, I've been reading these Jedi texts, and now I'm caught up on all the stuff that would have been lost to the ages, because he had sort of an abbreviated training, right? He only trained for a little while with Yoda. It was kind of ambiguous for how long. So to me, it made sense that he was hiding out on the island where the ancient Jedi knowledge is, because he was studying up on it so that when the new student came, he could pass everything on to that student, and that student would be in the best position to oppose the growing darkness. So all I really needed that we didn't get in that movie is a moment where Luke snaps out of it and says, okay, you know what? I've actually been waiting for someone like you. I didn't want to believe it was you. I had my doubts about you, so I didn't want to train you, but you're the one. Let's do this, kiddo. That's what I was waiting for. And that's kind of what I think was set up. I don't believe that J.J. Abrams intentionally set Luke up as, this guy who was waiting for the Jedi to end. I think he just had Luke be the wise old master who was waiting on the mountain for a student to show up.
That's definitely a possibility. I know that JJ wrote a treatment for 8, and Ryan didn't want it. Ryan wanted to do his own film. That's a whole nother
Exactly.
conversation about the planning for the sequel trilogy. But we can't do anything about that now. It's just
Right.
JJ kind of put Ryan in a box. There's only so much you can do when you have a character on an island. You could have gone that route, like you said, which I would have liked too, but I think we have to also remember that Ryan's doing his own story. So it was whatever Ryan decided, and Ryan chose to have the hermit on the island who wanted everything to die. And I think my counter to that is that Luke wanted to die with the Jedi, with the old text. He went to that island to die, as he says in that movie. Yeah, sure, the texts were there. He even says Yoda, when he talks to Yoda, Yoda's like, page turners, they were not. Luke really didn't care about those. I think of Luke's character almost as Anakin's. Luke makes the right step while Anakin makes the wrong step. Luke, by the end of that film, The Last Jedi, does become the hero. He does. He becomes the hero that everyone wants. And I know there's problems with that scene on Crane and everything. We could get into that later. But
yeah,
Luke's whole character, to me, um, is supposed to mirror his dad's because his dad it's a he even says it in that movie, The Mighty Skywalker Blood. It's a dangerous family, I guess you could say. You know, they're so powerful. They're I think of the Skywalkers like Superman. If you have a good Superman, that's great. But what if he's evil? Then you're screwed. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's that's how I've always interpreted it. I think, and again, I don't love Luke in that movie, but I understand it. It's supposed to make us connect to him. I think it's easier for
No, I'm losing him. Why am I losing him? Hello, you there?
you got me? Am I good?
Yeah, I lost you as you were saying.
Okay.
You
I
were
don't
talking
know.
about Superman. Yeah, again,
Yeah, yeah.
I have the worst internet router on the face of the planet for some odd reason.
Yeah, I heard you just fine. I didn't know what was happening. But yeah, I was just saying that Luke's journey makes sense to me in that film because I need my character to be relatable, and it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of relatable to have Luke is essentially a godly like figure, be depressed, be down because he was a failure. He failed at a basic thing of keeping his of essentially a family safe. The Jedi Order to him was his family, and he
Mm-hmm.
failed at keeping his family safe. So to me, I understand how you wanted, the Luke to be kind of like in the hero's journey, like the mentor hero. Like he's the mentor, but and he's waited for that new student. But we also have to remember that uh, Luke and Obi-Wan uh, are different in the sense, and Yoda when they're all in exile.
Right.
Obi-Wan and Yoda are know about Luke. They know that he's coming. They Obi-Wan talks about in Rebels. I know this happens after release wise
Right.
than Return of the Jedi, but he talks about how he believes Luke's the chosen one. Luke has no idea about Rey. He just thinks that Kylo's gonna kill all the Force users in the galaxy, or there's no order left. So I understand where you're coming from. It's just that the problem I have when people critique this film is they talk about their wants, and that sounds like a cool want, but that's not actually critiquing what happened.
Okay, well
That's
then let me take it down a different direction for you. Okay,
all right. Go
because what
ahead.
we were talking about is specifically an example of the kind of thing that they could have. Um, I, I'm going to start off with this. You've made a point that I've heard people make before, and that is that JJ put Ryan in a box. Part of the problem is that I sort of fundamentally disagree with that statement because I don't feel that I feel that Ryan put himself in that box because JJ had a plan which Ryan clearly did not follow. So he kind of said, "Okay, this is he's here, and presumably he had a reason why he was there." And then Ryan said, "Well, I want to do my own thing," and he kind of springboarded from there. But I think through it really doesn't take an awful lot of digging to really see that the two were at odds. And I kind of don't feel bad for Ryan and say, oh my God, he was backed into a corner if he was presented the path out of the corner and he said, well, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do something different. The other thing is, quite frankly, what you're talking about, I mean, I don't disagree either that Luke should absolutely have a character arc. Every character should have an arc. My problem is that Luke's arc sort of undoes his previous arc. I have no problem with Luke failing. In fact, I made a video where I talked about this. What I said, a way that they could have, and this isn't a want. This is sort of like what would have made sense and would have just an example of the kind of thing which wouldn't have violated the character of Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is all about hope. He's the one guy in the galaxy who looked at Darth Vader, guy who butchered children, and said, that guy still has good. I know it can be reached. And yet we're supposed to believe that he looks at his sleeping nephew and says, there's nothing savable in there. He hasn't done anything yet. He hasn't killed anyone. All that Luke mentions he has seen is hints and traces that he's going down the dark path until he comes to the hut, looks at his heart and says, oh my God, his heart is turned. and then tries, or there's a big debate over the word try, but has a moment where he almost does something he regrets, right? So my argument has been and always been that, Jedi are monks. They are Shaolin monks. They spend their entire life training their mind, body, and spirit, especially light side users. In order to serve the light side, the very first thing one has to do is to make sure that one isn't acting on their instincts or their emotions, because that leads to the dark side. So to be a servant of the light, you have to spend your time training yourself to not be impulsive, to not be impetuous, to not act out of instinct or anger or what have you, or else you're just plain not a very good Jedi. So for Luke to have the moment where he even gets to the point of igniting the lightsaber, and actually a video breakdown of this, like this is a good 12 seconds. He reaches to his belt, he pulls it out, he holds it in his hand, he thinks about it, he scowls, he grips it tight, he gets up, like, so there's a whole thought process he clearly goes through where he's like making the decision, I need to end this. And my argument is that that is so far out of the frame of Luke's character that it's virtually unrecognizable to what we saw in the previous movies, and it also completely undoes the character arc where he learns to get past that particular flaw. So what I think they could have done, and again, I'm giving an example of the kind of thing that makes sense, not necessarily just this is what I wanted to happen, but something that would not have violated the fan base in the way that that did, is, if Luke is so hopeful, if he's eternally hopeful, why not flip that? Have him have all the faith in the world that Ben is going to pull back from the darkness. Like literally, like he sees it coming. He's looking at Ben turning. He's like, no, he's going to pull out of this. I know he is. All it takes is a pat on the shoulder and a couple of kind words from me, and he'll pull out of this. And Luke is horrified when, Kylo snaps, ignites his lightsaber, cuts down his students, and leaves him buried in a heap. And Luke just pulls himself out of the heap. It's like, oh my God, what happened? Now, you see, that's an example of something they could have done, just an example, where, we're seeing one of Luke's traits that is inherent to the character, and we're using that as a flaw and saying that maybe sometimes he has too much in people. And that's a way that he could have failed. And you could have put him through this whole arc where he goes to the island because he thinks he failed. Rey shows up, and, Rey has to talk some sense into him. And at some point he comes around and says, you know what, you're right. So there you could have gone through the same exact arc you're talking about without something that feels like it violates the character so thoroughly, which is, I mean, let's face it, if you talk to 90% of the people who have problems with The Last Jedi, I think the universal thing that they will agree with is that Luke nearly killing his nephew is the no-no moment. That's the moment that everyone's like, this doesn't feel like Luke to me.
Yeah, I agree with that statement, but my counter to that would be is that when I think about it, when I think about that film, and I compare it, that scene in the hut where he looks at the lightsaber, looks at Ben, to when he chops his dad's hand off, and he looks at his hand, he looks at his dad, and the camera pans to his dad on the ground, almost like begging for his life. Those two scenes somewhat mirror each other, in my opinion, because it's almost a callback in The Last Jedi. Luke always
Well, it is a
struggles.
callback. It's clearly a
Right.
callback. That's
Luke
the way it was intended.
Luke again, I think of Luke and Anakin as their arcs are pretty similar to me. In Anakin's case, he makes the wrong decisions. In Luke's case, he makes the right ones.
Right.
Luke has a moment where he's gonna kill his father because of the anger in him. He wants to protect his family, and then he drops the lightsaber, and the rest is history. I
Right.
think of it the same way in The Last Jedi, where he's gonna kill Ben because he's fearful of what is to come to his friends and family. Um, but he doesn't do it because I think he's hopeful. I actually think he is hopeful for Ben. I really do. But he has a moment of weakness, and that's an important trait in a Skywalker, is that they have moments of weakness. They're godlike figures that have moments of weakness, and that's how we relate to them. I
I
feel
wouldn't
like
even
if
say I wouldn't even go as far as to say that they're God like. I think it's accurate to say that Luke should be the like the best shining example of a Jedi. And Jedi aren't gods, and they have flaws. But I think once again, if the flaw that you try to give a Jedi is that he loses his temper and almost kills someone in their sleep, I think you're missing the point of a Jedi. And at that point, like, you know, he's a pretty terrible Jedi. And quite frankly, like I do see what you're saying. I'm not going to say that you don't have a point when you're saying you're making the parallel to Vader, but there's two incredibly important details that separate what happens in Return of the Jedi and what happens in The Last Jedi. And that is, number one, the moment where he almost kills Vader is during combat. He is fighting Vader in a life or death battle. And, you know, Luke has his moment, sure, when, if you will not turn, perhaps she will, where he comes out and attacks him. But nonetheless, Luke was locked in a life or death confrontation with two Sith Lords, and defending himself with a lightsaber against Vader when he has that moment where he almost strikes him down. It's more like the anger builds in the heat of battle, and is he able to pull himself back when with his passions riled up at the top of his of the stress? Is he able to pull himself back? And he does, right? That is way different from a student who is in your care who hasn't turned yet. That's the other thing. Like, he says his heart has turned, but Ben is sleeping wearing Jedi robes. He's still Luke's student in Luke's care. As far as we know, and there's absolutely no indication of this, Ben hasn't turned. He hasn't said, I'm leaving. He's still a student of Luke's. And he's sleeping prone, defenseless, and unarmed in that moment. And Luke almost killed. There's a world of difference between a warrior monk nearly killing someone in the heat of battle because his passions get riled up, versus walking into a hut to check on the kid, reading his mind, being, oh crap, it's going to be too late, there's nothing I can do, and igniting your lightsaber and almost striking first, which is what Luke did. So I see your point about, I appreciate that Rian Johnson wanted to continue the sort of rhyming poetry that George Lucas talks about. But I feel like the way that that was done was really it's the devil is in the details. And the details in that scene put Luke in a place where you can't rationalize, at least I can't rationalize, why he would get to that point and still be the character. And I mentioned that there are two things, right? The first thing is that there's a difference between being in a battle with someone and a sleeping prone unarmed person. The other difference is that this was Luke's Jedi trial. In order for him to become a Jedi, he had to conquer that character trait. So 30 years later, for him to fall prey to the same exact flaw, but this time with someone who wasn't even putting him in immediate danger, to me, it's, even from a writing point of view, and you can argue all you want whether the logic makes sense, but from a writing point of view, to make the character go through the same arc twice, to have them have the same moment, it effectively erases his moment in Return of the Jedi and says that he hasn't learned from that after all these years. And that would be fine if he wasn't a Jedi. In order to be a Jedi, he needed to conquer that. You know, I don't think if you went into a Shaolin monk temple and you met one of those guys who's been there since birth and they're able to sit on hot coals and they meditate for 50 hours a day, I don't think if you make a sudden noise, they'll jump up and put a knife at your throat out of instinct, because they would have trained so hard and so long to not have that instinct anymore. It wouldn't make sense at that point. So, I mean, I see what you're saying, and there are other ways to do it. If you wanted to have a moment in the story where Luke and Ben, during training, it gets too heated, and then Luke almost has the point where he strikes him down, at least then you could argue it was in the heat of battle. But, you know, it's never a good look, and it's there's very little, I think, that can justify Luke almost striking him down in his sleep when he hasn't even turned yet. I mean, that's really the sticking point for me.
Okay, that I definitely understand that. I definitely acknowledge that. But we also have to, you talked about how there was difference in circumstances. I also
Right.
want to talk about the difference in characters. Vader
Okay.
at that point, you could make the argument, is not really Vader. That's Anakin coming back. That's he's Vader is not full of his rage at that point. There was conflict within him. I personally believe, and I watched Return of the Jedi, that Anakin starts to come back when it's after Vader and Luke talk on the Forest Moon of Endor, and it's Vader leaning over the rail, probably contemplating his life decisions. That's when I think Anakin starts to return. I don't think Vader that's fighting in Return of the Jedi is the Vader we see in A New Hope. I think those are two different. Like that's a Vader that's a full of rage, and in Return of the Jedi, that's almost Anakin coming
Yeah, you're
back.
saying that Luke has already begun to bring Anakin out in Vader at that
Right,
point. Right.
right.
Okay. Okay.
And I think Kylo was the opposite. I don't. I think Ben Solo was dying, and the birth of this persona of Kylo Ren is arising because we know. And I don't like using comics and books. Like this is outside media. I know it's canon, but
Right. Right.
he's
Yeah.
already met with Snoke at this point, I believe. So like Luke can probably sense that. If Luke can sense that, and Luke also sensed that Palpatine may still be alive in books and comics. So
Right.
if he senses that in Ben Solo, he never saw the atrocities that Vader committed. He's probably horrified of what could happen. He's heard of it, but he never saw what his dad did. And personally, if I never saw my dad do the terrible things he did, I'd still want to bring him back. But if I did see the terrible things he did, I probably wouldn't. So there's a big distinction to me.
By the same token, Ben hadn't done those terrible things yet either. We're
Right,
talking
but
about striking someone down because they might do something if he
yes,
fails
Luke
to
wanted to
stop
prevent it.
him.
Right,
Right.
right. Luke wants to prevent it.
To that,
I
I'd
think
say
that's
this.
very reasonable. I
Well,
think that's reasonable.
so there's two things I'll say to that. First of all, I'll say that um, yes, at that point in Return of the Jedi, Anakin was beginning to come out, but Anakin was beginning to come out because Luke had seen the good in him even before that. So, you're talking about this full of rage Vader from A New Hope and Empire. Well, guess what? Luke looked into that face, said, I think my father's still in there, made that conscious choice. And that's when that Anakin started to come out. So, I mean, making no mistake, he didn't look at an Anakin who had already started to bubble back to the surface. He looked at the dark void of Darth Vader and said, I'm sure my dad's still in there because I have hope. So it just is odd that he would look at a kid who hasn't actually done anything yet and said, oh, yeah, he's beyond saving. This is inevitable. I'm going to, kill him while he's sleeping. You see what I'm saying? And the other question that I'll pose is this. I feel like you do make a compelling argument for your side. I hope you think that I make a compelling argument for mine.
No, I
And
definitely
what
do. I definitely
and
do.
what I'll say is, as a creator who is charged with building the story that an entire generation of Star Wars fans will follow, do you not construct your story in such a way so that you haven't pissed off half of the fan community and we have to have this conversation? Is there nothing they could have done in the story other than say, the only way we can do this is to have Luke nearly murder a sleeping student who hasn't turned yet? Is there no way for Luke to fail other than to do something that is so extreme that half of the fan base will be arguing with the other half about whether or not it even makes sense enough to be in the movie? And my argument is absolutely not. There are dozens of off the top of my head, I've named two things they could have done, which would have accomplished the same thing without irritating half the fan base. And I think what it boils down to is that Rian Johnson has said numerous times, this is the kind of thing he wants to do. He took a multi-billion-dollar franchise and he said, I'm going to make a movie that will upset half of the fan base. And he decided to make a deconstructionist movie halfway through a trilogy and did something that, it's kind of hard to argue that it's not controversial. I'm not saying that you're making that argument, but other people have. When Rian Johnson himself says, I like making controversial movies, I think I have failed if half of the audience doesn't think it's the worst movie they've ever seen. So the fact that he would come in here and do that with Star Wars, the fact that he would do something with Luke that was so contentious that half the fan base up and walks away. There's numerous ways that you could have subverted our expectations, I'll say. because the thing that I've always said about subverting expectations is this: if you are going to subvert my expectations, you need to give me something that is better than I could have imagined, better than my expectations were, not give me something that has me saying, wait a minute, what are you doing?
Yeah, I definitely understand that, but I think to challenge your point, you're when we talk about the fandom being divided, you have the hindsight of seeing that. Ryan didn't. Ryan didn't know what the fans were going to think when he created that. Maybe he did, but we
Eh,
don't know. You can't make that but you can't make that argument. You can't say that Ryan knew he was going to divide the fandom evenly. You can't say that. Ryan doesn't know. You would
well, what
have
I
to
can say
prove
is
that.
his exact words. Well, I use his exact words. The kind of film that interests me is one where half of the people tell me it's the worst movie they saw, and half of them tell me it was the best they ever saw. He said, "I if I don't do that, then I feel I've failed." That's what he
Right.
said before making this movie. So, I
Right.
mean, the result matches up with what he said before. So, I mean, I would say that as proof goes, that's as good a piece of the puzzle as any. He
Sure.
literally did what he said he always likes doing. And, I mean, I don't think it takes immense foresight to suggest that making Luke do something that outrageous is not going to piss off half of the fans. Like,
Right,
I
but again, that's
feel I was
it
making a
goes back.
movie, like, I would know that I was doing something really challenging.
Yeah, but then again, it goes back to the point of what fans wanted. That's like uh, uh, Ryan is just making his story. It's what he wants. That's all that matters. Like uh, pissing
Well, I
off
mean,
half
you
the
can do
like
that.
I don't I,
You,
right,
but I mean,
but I
it's when you're making a multi-million-dollar franchise that's based on a passionate fan base. I would challenge this because I've heard people say that all the time. This is oh, you're just mad you didn't get what you want. Well, shouldn't you give the fan base at least partially what they want? Not necessarily spoon feed them exactly what they're asking for, but don't hand them something that is like half the fan base is like, no, this is the exact opposite of what I wanted. I mean, you do need to think of the fans a little bit. Mark Hamill said as much in an interview with Ryan Johnson, and I happen to agree with Mark in that instance. He was. You do have to think that the fans built this fandom. So here's another problem here. People talk about how poor Ryan Johnson has been attacked by the fans and all of this other stuff, but the movie wasn't out, and he was holding up that little plaque that said, "Your Snoke theory sucks." Now, that was fans who were excited about his movie and guessing what he would do with Snoke. And he was being confrontational with the fans before the movie was even out, and we knew whether to like it or dislike it. So I would argue that all of the evidence points to Ryan Johnson wanting to make a divisive movie because he stated outwardly that's what he wants to do. He made a divisive movie, and I'll tell you, I get this sort of contradictory argument from people. Again, not you, but from some people who have said to me, "I think that Star Wars is so great because it's so controversial, or The Last Jedi is so great because it's so controversial and because it takes so many bold choices." But then when I talk about the bold choices, they claim, "Well, wait a minute, that was actually the natural progression of the character." So, I mean, do you like it because it's bold, or do you like it because it's a natural progression? It can't be both.
and to your point about Ryan Johnson, I'm gonna say this:
Mhm.
I really don't want Ryan to do anything else in Star Wars. I kind
Yeah,
of want to move away from that era. I like probably the 2018 time to be, or when did the last Jedi come out? 2017. 2017, that
yeah,
time.
late 2017.
Right. Probably the worst time to be a fan. I'm
Yeah,
just gonna be
no
honest.
shadow of a doubt.
I mean, so like I am not and again, like I said before, I'm not a huge fan of this film. I just have grown to acknowledge some of the things that have happened and try when I critique this film, I try to critique what actually happened. And I know that you are also doing the same. But some people, when I talk to about this movie, and again, not you, is like their headcanon. Wow, that is so disappointing. Okay, there we go.
My browser just completely closed on me. I don't
All
know.
right, you're back. You're good.
All right, cool.
Uh, so yeah, so I guess basically we could kind of move off of this Luke and this Luke topic, but You had made another video that I kind of want to talk about. It doesn't have to do with The Last Jedi, but
Okay.
it had to do with Kathleen Kennedy. And I think this is an interesting conversation. So I kind of want to get your take on um, Kathleen and her doings with Star Wars, I guess. So I'll let you take it away.
So the difficult thing. First of all, can you hear me? Because I did have to switch up my mic.
Yeah, you're good. You're
Okay,
perfect.
cool, cool. So the thing about Kathleen Kennedy is it's virtually impossible to have this conversation without making a lot of assumptions. And a lot of times when I talk about this subject, people are like, "Well, you can't prove that. You don't know that." I mean, aside from Lucasfilm putting out a press release saying this is what's going on behind the scenes, like we're never going to know if this is what's happening or what it's not. What I can do is look at what has been presented to us and make assumptions based on that. Sort of like the same thing that we were just talking about with Ryan Johnson. You and I can't definitively say what's in the guy's head, but I can take his quotes and what he said and how he's reacted and sort of make assumptions. And that's what we kind of have to do with Kathleen Kennedy. So what I can tell you about Kathleen Kennedy is that she has also been confrontational with a portion of the fan base. And I mean, I feel like what I see more often than not is people who are defenders of The Last Jedi. And I don't mean just people who like it or people like you who have valid points to make about their interpretation of the facts, which are no more valid than mine. What I'm talking about is the people who literally will tooth and nail fight you to the death, saying that it is the perfect film, nothing was wrong. And, if you don't like it, you must be sexist, misogynist, racist, whatever. So what I can say is that those people, tooth and nail, and they will give no quarter on this, insist that Kathleen Kennedy has been a boon to the industry and nobody backstage has a problem with her at all. Everybody gets along hunky-dory. She's doing great things. All the successes of Star Wars are on her shoulders, and there's nothing more to see here. Move along. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Right?
Right.
What I can say is that she's been a divisive figure. If you look at the different Star Wars projects, the movies that have come out, let's see, Chris and Phil Lord, let's see, Rogue One went through two directors.
Gareth Edwards was
Gareth Edwards.
Yeah.
It seems like an awful lot of directors have been future opportunityed, as wrestling fans say. I'm future endeavored. That's it. Like they're good luck in your future endeavors. Fired or left for various reasons. Creative differences is usually cited. Exactly two movies have the intended director that they started with. JJ with The Force Awakens and Ryan with The Last Jedi. Every other film in Kennedy's tenure has switched directors at least once. And quite frankly, if you wanted to be nitpicky, Steven Spielberg walked away from Indiana Jones. A lot of people think that's just because he's got other things to do, but I don't know. All I see is another director has moved away from a Kathleen Kennedy production. So again, if we're reading between the lines, unless there's going to be a signed affidavit from Disney and Lucasfilm saying these are the things that have happened behind the scenes, all we can do is look at what we see. And, there's been a lot of conflict that we've seen indirectly. And to suggest that there's absolutely nothing to that, I think is a bit naive.
So I guess this is my take on Kathleen. My thing is, it's like I think Star Wars needs a Kevin Feige, and this is nothing against Kathleen. It needs a Kevin Feige type of producer that actually
Yes.
is invested in the material. Kathleen's probably a good executive producer. I mean, she's been on she was on Back to the Future. She worked with Spielberg. She's worked with great people. I don't I won't gloss over that, but I don't think I think she might care about it, but I don't think she cares about the material. And again, I will acknowledge,
someone asked her, were you a fan of Star Wars before you became the head of Lucasfilm? And her response was, well, I was really a fan of what it meant to the Like I respected what it meant to the industry. Like that is something you say when you're not a fan and you're trying to answer as diplomatically as possible. So she's not a fan of Star Wars, but she's at the head of it. Like that's concerning to me right off the bat. And what I can say is, I'll leave it to you, Hemi. Do you want the even tempered diplomatic Jedi derelict, or do you want me to ignite the lightsaber and be the controversial figure that you want to be on the show to be?
Uh, Go all out. I don't care. I
All
like when
right.
people give their raw opinions.
All,
That's what I'm looking for.
all right. I'll say this. Um, when Kathleen Kennedy was working for Spielberg on the early Indiana Jones films, he described her as a terrible secretary who was supposed to just write notes and instead was terrible at that and would jump in the meetings out of place and start saying, well, what if this happens? What if you did this? What if he doesn't get the girl, but he gets the dog? That was an actual quote from Spielberg. And people were like, oh, well, he said it lovingly. And it's like, yeah, but it paints a picture. They're not going to say anything negative. She married, oh God, what was it? Gary Marshall? It's not, is it Gary Marshall? Her husband?
Not sure. I'm honestly not sure.
I could be getting the name wrong, but I think it's Gary Marshall. Um, she, all of the really good movies that she was on with Gary Marshall and several other producers. She was like one of like three or four producers. Back to the Future with Zemeckis and the Indiana Jones films. If you look at the movies that she's done alone, you got Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I mean, the movies that she's produced haven't, by and large, been her best work. And there are many who have made the argument that she just sort of was one of the clique of friends who kept getting promoted because she was competent enough. Um, I I stopped short of saying that that is absolute fact, but what I can tell you is that from what I have seen of her work as a producer, um, I don't think it's a mark of a good producer to come into a franchise and to tell half of its fan base this is no longer for you. I don't think you stand up there and you tell the fans that they're wrong for not liking something. If you're a good producer, if you're a good producer, you don't go through 8 of your 10 directors. So, what I would argue is that she doesn't like Star Wars. There seems to be a lot of friction behind the scenes. The movies that she's produced, while she's you can't argue against Rogue One. I love Rogue One. I love The Force Awakens. I didn't even hate The Last Jedi, even though I talk about it a lot. But what I can tell you is that she doesn't seem like the person to be leading Lucasfilm by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely understand the complaints about Kathleen when it comes to the Star Wars standpoint. Uh, I will say it is like what you were saying earlier with I believe it's 3 of the 5 films switching directors, and especially Rogue One. I mean, Rogue One was a mess. They pretty much reshot that film in like less than a year,
Miracle
which
it came
is
out as well as it did.
right. And I will say I got to give Kathleen credit at some points. I mean, uh, she put Dave as the executive creator. She's the main reason that Clone Wars season 7 came back. I mean, if you look at Bob Iger has multiple quotes where he said that he didn't think that animation was a big part of Star Wars, and he's dead wrong about that. Um, she was a big reason that Clone Wars season 7 came back. She's a big reason that Dave is even doing live action. She encouraged Dave to do live action. Dave was on the set of The Last Jedi, so I have to acknowledge that Kathleen has done some things good. Obviously, she greenlit all of these new projects we're getting, but I just don't think Kathleen is what Star Wars needs. I
Well,
don't. I think
I'll put it to you this way. So what you're describing, when she acts in the capacity of somebody who is in charge of the show from a purely executive standpoint, and she's like, okay, what creative should I put in charge of this project? Dave Filoni, he's a good choice. Put him over there. Gareth Edwards, he's a good choice. This person. Um, then yeah, she does a good enough job, certainly. she chose JJ, and I love The Force Awakens. You know, honestly, like the only real movie in in her run that I've completely, not even completely disliked, but that I've had major issues with is The Last Jedi. Um, Rise of Skywalker is what I call a beautiful mess. There are things I love about it, and there are things that I despise about it. It doesn't have the anger that Last Jedi has, because Last Jedi to me was intentionally confrontational with its fans, and that has an entirely different vibe from Rise of Skywalker, which was trying desperately to please us but made some missteps. So I can't look at her body of work and say, oh my God, she's produced nothing but crap. What I can say is that, you know, the role of producer is an incredibly vague role. You could donate $1 million to any film in Hollywood and be listed as a producer. You know, Rick McCallum was producer on the prequels. He had nothing to do with the creative decisions. All he did, and he actually said this in the beginning, which was the oh, no, I'm sorry, it was within a minute, the making of episode 3. He said, it's my job as the producer to make sure that George has everything he needs to execute his vision. So there are producers like Rick McCallum who literally just sit back and make sure that everybody's on set for George. And then there are producers like George Lucas during Raiders, where he's actually involved in the creative process. Producer is an incredibly vague thing. So, you know, her role as a producer when she's lining people up and choosing people to work on a project, infinitely better than when she takes any sort of a creative role, as far as I've seen. You know, everybody talks about how Captain Phasma was this wasted opportunity. There's literally a scene in the documentary of The Force Awakens that mentions that Kathleen Kennedy just saw a design and said, "Oh, put that in the movie." And you know, then we wonder why Phasma had little to no spot in the movie. It's because she wasn't created for a story reason. She was created because Kathleen Kennedy pointed at something shiny and said, "Put that in the movie." So, you know, as a creative, I don't trust her to work on Star Wars. As somebody who's sitting in an office and deciding who's going to work on what, you know, marginally more successful.
Okay, that's fair. So, my counter to that would be is there's a behind the scenes of The Mandalorian, season 1, where she's with the directors and stuff, and the directors actually give her some credit. They praise her almost, you know, as much as, and everybody loves. I think we could agree here that The Mandalorian is almost universally loved by the fandom. Uh, you know, I'm not going to say she made. I don't think she made creative decisions on that show, but by what Dave has said about her, by what John has said about her, but what Rick Famuyiwa, Taika, what all those directors were saying in that behind the scenes on The Mandalorian was that they loved her. She helped. So
What I
again.
what I can say is this: I don't know. I don't know what your life looks like outside of podcasting. I don't know what you do for a living or anything like that. But I'll tell you that I used to. You know, I've had a few jobs in my day, and you know, back when I was younger and I worked at, like, for instance, Best Buy, and I had a boss who was a pain in the ass, and the district manager came in. Um, the guys who say to the district manager, "Oh yeah, you know, I think that we all work together as a team, and oh my God, you know, this supervisor, they've been such a help. They really executed the plan and the vision." The guys who say that are the ones who tend to stick around in the company and get a promotion. And the loudmouths like me, who's like, I don't know, like I think that we got our sales despite this person over here. Those are the guys who don't stick around. So I mean, there is a bit of Hollywood politics going on. You don't sit there with the cameras rolling on you, making a behind the scenes documentary with your boss sitting across you and say anything other than, "Oh, she's so wonderful. She's done such a great, thank you so much for bringing us aboard and doing all this." Anybody who makes those sort of first of all, if anyone said anything negative, they just would have cut it out of the documentary. They're not going to put that in there. And second of all, like, those are the people who are successful and they know, you know, what roles to play when they're on camera, and when, you know, they know who to publicly thank. And This is just sort of the reality of this. I think we fall into the trap of taking people for their word when it supports our argument, and then sort of dismissing what's said when it doesn't. And I think that you have to sort of look at everything individually and say, how likely would it be that they'd sit in front of the camera and not be gracious to their boss? So I mean,
Yeah,
an argument for that, for them saying that, like, she's great. For everything that has been reported recently has been that that there is some actual legit tension between Kathleen Kennedy's team at Lucasfilm and the people who are making the Mandalorian with Favreau. And apparently, there's
who's reported that? Who?
there have been a few reports of it. I know Midnight Edge has talked about it. What's
That
that other one with the
that's not a credible source. That's come on, man. That's like we got this covered. The Midnight's Edge has gotten zilch, zero right. He's a Mike Zero. He's a Mike Zero.
Oh, he's not a
That's
Mike
the
Zero. I
yes
mean,
he is.
that's
Yes he is. He's got nothing right.
the what's the one with the Nerd Vengers Tower? I
Oh, Dan of Josh?
Yeah,
Josh?
yeah.
Yeah, I like Josh, but he
Josh
does.
reported that. Um, and I know
Josh did not report that. I'm gonna say that Josh did not say that because I watch all of his
I've seen him
content. He
talk
did not
about
say
it.
that.
I've seen him
He's
talk.
talked about it, but he has not. He's not said what Midnight Edge has said. That's that. Come on, we can't believe that, right? Are you gonna believe that?
So this is what I'm gonna do. What I'm gonna do is every source that comes in, I'm gonna compare it to what I actually see in the real world. And I'm not going, like, even Mike Zero. When Mike Zero says something, I'll be like, does it sound like that could at any way be on the level? No, okay, and I discount it. But when I hear things that align with what I'm seeing and hearing every day, then I don't discredit and this is sort of what I call the Fox News MSNBC trap. If you talk to a conservative, they'll tell you anything from MSNBC is complete left-leaning propaganda. And if you talk to someone who's on the left, they'll tell you that Fox News is complete right-leaning propaganda. Don't listen to it. And people discount news sources without doing independent investigation. So what I'll say is, yeah, there have been reports. I'm not verifying those reports. I'm saying that this is a report that has been reported, and does it line up with what we're seeing? And
Okay.
I'm not ready to discount anything. I give everything the proper amount of consideration. And what I can say is that Kathleen Kennedy's team seems to be sitting on one side of the bleachers. There doesn't seem to be a lot of crossover between the Lucasfilm Story Group and what Favreau's doing. If you read the Iger's book, there are passages in there that seem to back it up. It seems that he took more direct control over the Mandalorian. So, I mean, I understand your point. Like, I don't believe everything that comes in. But I'm also not going to do the knee jerk, oh, well, that source doesn't count, so anything they say isn't true.
Okay. So I guess there's a couple of things here. So my TikTok content is basically reported on leaks and rumors. That's the stuff I like to do because I like to speculate from there.
Okay.
And again, I
Me,
do.
not so much.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be fair, we're in an arena that I'm not really
Right.
fully versed in. I
Okay.
don't tend to report on this stuff. What
I
I can
get that.
tell you is that those reports, they don't immediately ring false to me based on what I see in the fandom and what I see in the creative side of it.
Sure, but here's the thing. I I'll get on my computer, I'll do like an hour or so of research on the leaks, the rumors. I'll listen to people talk about them. I'll see if other people that corroborate them or if they have their sources. I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna tell you right now. I guarantee it. Midnight's Edge or any of his close friends in the and again, I don't care if you watch the Fandom Menace. That doesn't bother me. Uh, um, his friends within the Fandom Menace, they don't have good sources. I'm just gonna say that now because they haven't gotten enough right. I look at when I talk about credible leakers and scoopers, they're people that have gotten stuff consistently right and that they can back up other people's stories. Midnight's Edge seems like fan fiction. It seems like he is making it up. So, and again, that's I know this is not your arena, but I'm
Right.
just trying to explain that it is frustrating for somebody like me who does their research, does their due diligence, and tries to get accurate scoops about characters and leaks. And again, these may not be true, but there's a good possibility because I try to do my due diligence when I research it. But when I hear people who know that Midnight's Edge, and I'm not saying you, people like Midnight's Edge, Geeks and Gamers, uh, those people in the Fandom Menace, use them as a source, and they know that they're not right usually. That's beyond frustrating for me. So, and I understand what you're saying, but
Now again,
I
fair, I've never used them as a source. Go back and watch my video. Like I've never once said
right,
this has been like the most that I've said is it has been reported.
right, but I don't think it's fair to even say it has been reported because they've gotten nothing right. It's basically
So
like me
so
saying it.
so if they've gotten if they've got nothing right, then it's easy enough to go back and say that. It's easy enough to say they've reported this. They're not a trustworthy source. Does the actual thing they said have any credence to it?
It doesn't have no, it doesn't have any merit. Just saying that people have reported it, I don't. That's not what I do. That's not how
But
it should.
again,
No,
I'm not reporting on leaks. I'm talking about the fandom and the war and the culture when I
right,
reference that.
right, right. I understand that,
Right.
but again,
You know, it
when
would
you
be
say
like you could say that like Fox News says that Trump just saved North Korea, and I wouldn't be like I'm not saying that Trump saved North Korea. I'm saying Fox News has reported that. You know what I'm saying? And like when
okay,
we're talking about
yeah,
the culture war, my area is talking about what happens in the movie and to an extent the culture war.
right,
So I just want to clarify. I'm not trying to
no,
verify
no, no,
thing. What I can tell you is that, going back to our original point here, is that, as far as I can tell, Kathleen Kennedy's, and, even just go back to Bob Iger's book for this bit, Kathleen Kennedy has been more involved in the movies and Favreau has been more involved in the shows. I mean, that's just been, she's not been directly creatively involved in every single project. I mean, that's just
well, again, it's hard to prove anything behind the scenes there.
well,
So
that's kind of what I said from the beginning. So all you can really do is
right, but
speculate based on what you hear and what you see.
well, I think it's dangerous to speculate based on false information or information from a source that's not credible. That's all I'm saying. I think it's very dangerous to speculate like that.
Well, I mean, okay, you can think that. I don't present myself as a news source. I present myself as like this is what I've heard and this is what I think about it.
I personally think it's dangerous to put that on the internet because then you got to rile up fans and it's going to turn out to not be true. That's what I'm based. It's going to turn out not to be true. And I'm going to say this: there is little to no evidence that Kathleen has the same title for every project. So we can't prove what she has done in the movies and the TV shows. We can't prove what creative input she has. So that's just dangerous speculation to me based on no nothing.
Okay. Well, I mean, what we can do is we can look for the hallmarks of the kinds of things that she says that, she wants to see done in Star Wars. And,
Like what does she want to see done?
well, like for instance, the fact that she has from the beginning said that she wanted to put a focus on um growing the female side of the fandom. That was one of the first things that she said when she got in there. So, one could speculate that the projects that she has had more creative control in leans more on that side.
I mean, maybe, but you would have to prove what creative input she's had on those projects. We're now just in a game of like he say she said. We're now just
And
risky speculation. That's
well,
I don't want
I
to
mean,
deal with that.
there's to what end then? I mean, like what? I mean, maybe I've lost the plot here for a minute, but like I'm not sure like what this conversation even has to do with what we were talking about. I feel like all we're really, we'd really started on what the idea that Kathleen Kennedy's role, and we could assume that absolutely everything that happens in Star Wars right now is her doing. If you want to, we could assume that she has more control in some projects than in others, which I think would be common sense. Like not
I
every
don't think it
producer.
I don't think it is. I really don't. She has the same title for everything. So I would my head goes to she does the same thing for everything.
I mean, there's only
She
so
has the same
there's only so many hours in a day. Like you can't
right.
like that would be like saying Kevin Feige is directly involved in every single creative decision that happens, you know. And it's interesting because he doesn't get that kind of speculation either. We don't take a look at Ant-Man and Wasp and wonder if this particular decision was Kevin Feige's or not.
Sure, but I guess to just end this conversation, I guess my whole thing is like, uh, if we're going to speculate on what Kathleen Kennedy has done or doesn't do, or what she does do, what roles she has, it needs to have some type of merit, and we can't just throw it out there like what this source said, because really the behind the scenes stuff at Lucasfilm, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going on behind the scenes, and it's dangerous speculation to me. That's all I have to say on it.
So let me ask you this: why is it dangerous to speculate what's going on behind the scenes?
Because we're causing a rift when there probably is nothing. If we're
And
speculating that there's a divide with the Mandalorian behind the scenes, you're going to cause a rift within the fandom that
I would
doesn't need to be there.
I would argue that Kathleen Kennedy caused a rift in the fandom by attacking fans early on, and Ryan Johnson helped widen that rift by
How did she attack fans?
when she told fans that if you don't like what we're doing, then this probably isn't for you. When she insinuated that fans were misogynistic for not liking Rey and other female characters.
I mean, the first one is it's that's just basic common sense. If you as a consumer of the product don't like it, you don't have to watch. And
So
then the second one, I don't know. I
so you're
truly
the
haven't heard her say
CEO of
that.
a company. Do you say, hey, if you don't like our hamburgers, go f yourself? You don't do that. You as the head of Lucasfilm, who just took over from George Lucas, you don't go out there and tell long-term fans, well, we're sorry, this isn't for you because we're building
I
new Star Wars. I think that's
so
a thing to do from the beginning.
let me ask you this: George has always said that Star Wars is intended for kids. Don't you think? Would you also say that's problematic then too? If it's if he says the product's intended for kids,
If he said, if you aren't a kid, then this probably isn't for you, then yeah. He never said that. He said,
he's
I built this
insinuating
primarily.
it's made for kids.
There's a difference between insinuating that it's made for something and specifically telling a group of people who don't fit in that demographic that this isn't for you.
She didn't tell a specific group of people. She just said if you don't like the product, you don't have to watch it. That's with anything though in life. If you don't like it, you don't have to consume it, buy it, whatever. That's not. I don't think it's bad. I think that's what anybody would say.
I think you have to be a little bit more diplomatic when you are the new face of a multi-billion-dollar franchise in how you respond to your fans. I think a more diplomatic thing direction we're going, and we think you're all going to like it, and we want everyone to like it. Like like the whole controversy started with a line being drawn in the sand.
Okay, that's fair. I guess that's fair. Uh,
So anyway, my argument is this, and this is where I come into my whole question everything attitude. And maybe like I understand where you're someone who deals more with the facts of it all and the behind the scenes and the leaks and the stuff. So you need to verify sources to make sure that they're legitimate. I get that. That's the direction you're coming from. The direction that I'm coming from is is a really good way to shut down conversation by saying it's dangerous to speculate. It's a real, I feel like adults, me and you, seem to have no problem having a conversation where we're on different ends of it and making our points and respecting each other's positions. And if I say, I think that there's a division in the fandom, then we can have a discussion about where that comes from, like we're doing. But when you say, well, you can't cite this, you can't say that this happened because that's dangerous, what you're doing is you're shutting down a branch of conversation and making sure that anything that I have that could add to that is off limits in the discussion. I don't
Okay.
believe taking things off limits in the discussion, because too often people on one side of it shut down the conversation so that somebody can't make the points that they want to make, and it becomes a one-sided argument. So look, I'm not saying that the Phantom Menace is right. I'm not saying the Phantom Menace is wrong. I'm saying we don't dismiss anything that we hear. We look at anything and say, does it make sense? And if it makes sense, then that will speak. And if it doesn't make sense, then we can dismiss it offhand. I don't think it's dangerous to talk about anything. The only times that people say it's dangerous to discuss this is when the ideas that it will generate are dangerous to their viewpoints. And I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm saying that's what a lot of people do, and that's why I resist that line of thinking. If I'm
Okay,
wrong, it's going to come out in the facts and in the discussion.
that's fair. I just think my problem is just how my brain works and my logic works is like um I think when we talk about things, especially behind the scenes of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and we're listening to YouTube sources who historically haven't gotten really anything right, and then we're not you're not necessarily cited them. I understand that, but when we throw out the idea of sources have said, and we kind of use it to amplify my argument, that's kind of problematic to me. That and it again, maybe I'm misrepresenting you, but that's the way I'm interpreting it right
Okay,
now. Just
so
that's
let
the
me
last thing I
clarify
want to
something.
say about this topic. I'll let you go, and I kind of want to move on from this.
All
But
right, no
go
problem.
ahead.
I'll just clarify it then. The only reason that I cited anything is because when I said, I believe that there's evidence of this stuff happening. You said according to who? So I said, well, people have reported it, and I sort of said it more offhandedly than anything else. But I mean, I'll tell you this: I've worked in a number of companies in my life. I've never worked in a company where there wasn't some sort of behind the scenes cliques and groups forming. Why do we assume that everybody is on the same page in Lucasfilm, especially when we've already seen that Kathleen Kennedy has caused waves and caused half a dozen directors to walk out on her? So to assume that everybody is hunky dory behind the scenes, I feel is, it's contrary to what I see in every job that I've ever held in my life. So that's sort of where I come from that. I'm not citing any specific sources. I'm just saying, I there's certainly been chatter out there about it. And if it doesn't stand up, it won't stand up on its own. But I don't feel that like anything should just be dismissed offhand because X said this, so it must be false.
Uh, I'm not. I'm just last thing. I'm not going to dismiss it, but I'm just going to classify it as dangerous or risky speculation that is not needed in the fandom. That's all I'm going to say on it. That's the way my brain interprets it. But
Yeah,
again,
fair enough.
yeah. So
I, I,
I
I just
guess
I just always fear that that line of thinking can be used to shut down any conversation, because I
okay.
think I think that there has been some animosity between the creative team and the fandom, and we got to be careful that we don't get into the area where it's taboo to ever talk about that side of it, because God forbid then we might expose something that we don't want to talk about.
Yeah, I will say on my channel, or me and my good friend when we have our podcast, we will criticize Lucasfilm. We're not happy with some of the lack thereof of um, what happened with Gina Carano. I don't know what happened there. The lack of just marketing in general, the lack of telling us what's happening with the projects. That's where I come from there. But like, I don't want to speculate on the more behind the scenes stuff that it's almost impossible to get sources on.
Okay, well, fair enough. I just, like I said, we're never going to get something from Lucasfilm that's a written documentation of everything
Right.
on. So all we can do is look at what's happening, and all I can say is this: the if you're talking about the the thing that I was referencing, which is uh, behind the scenes strife between those aligned with Kennedy and those aligned with Favreau. What I can say is that Gina Carano got fired for making a statement, and a couple of weeks before, the host of that Star Wars show's High Republic show made some really inflammatory remarks, and Lucasfilm's response to that was to defend her and to tell the fans basically like back off because we're protecting her. So what it seems to me is that there is some kind of disconnect somewhere, and if we're not going to talk about it, that's because we can't accurately gauge where it's coming from because we don't have enough inside sources. Then that's
Yeah,
scary.
it's all right. I have no idea what just happened either. So everything was fine on my end. I don't know what happened. Go ahead.
I think it's my connection. I think it's my connection. So what I was basically saying, to sum it up, is that the Gina Carano situation, I feel like illustrates that there's something going on, because it seems to me that someone involved with the Mandalorian was fired for saying something outrageous, but someone involved with the High Republic show, Lucasfilm backed them up 100%.
Yeah. I can't remember her name. It was uncharacteristic. My only comment of it was unrealistic for Lucasfilm to outwardly support um somebody, especially if they're going through some type of drama. But I will say it was probably because of the backlash they got from the John Boyega interview that happened a couple weeks before, where he kind of
Mhm.
said that they pushed his character aside. So I guess that's my take on it. And I guess really, do you have anything else you want to talk about? Because I think that's really all I wanted to discuss. And we've been going for an hour and a half, so I was wondering if you have any other topics or any questions you want to ask me.
Um, so what well, I get to ask the host questions. That's pretty cool. So first of all, I'm glad that we can have a conversation like this. Clearly, we disagree about some things, but me and you have been. I feel like hopefully you feel like I'm respecting what you're saying, because I do,
Oh,
and
totally. I
I
respect what
totally
you say too.
thank you,
Totally.
thank you. I
I
appreciate
have
it.
these discussions all the time. These with fans.
And not everybody does, and I think that's kind of what I wanted to get into, because of the fact that like things are really. You pointed out that during the Darth Choco or chocolate or whatever it is thing, a lot of his fans sort of came at me with daggers. And I think one of the reasons that I'm so defensive about the idea of shutting down certain avenues of conversation, as you suggested, is because I feel like the people who defend The Last Jedi will do anything they can to shut down arguments coming from the other side. And I really think it's because Star Wars has, at least since the release of The Last Jedi, if not maybe a little bit before, become tied to politics, personal politics and personal beliefs, in a way that it never has before. I mean, let's be completely honest. We're talking about Gina Carano here. She was fired because what she said, not because what she said was so outrageous, but because people wanted to fire her for a long time because she has a set of political beliefs that a lot of the people in Lucasfilm don't agree with. She's been very outspoken as a conservative, and she's had a lot of, in fact, the thing that she actually said was that she felt that conservatives were being targeted the same way that Jewish people in pre World War II Germany were, where it becomes okay to criticize them, and then that builds to something else. And people call that anti-Semitic, which I don't really see that as an anti-Semitic comment when you're comparing yourself to Jewish people. Maybe it was inappropriate. Maybe she was lessening their plight in some way by comparing what she suffers to what they suffered. But to suggest that it's anti-Semitic against Jewish people, I think was a real reach. And to me, it felt like they went out of their way to look for some reason to let her go because they didn't like how she had been speaking. And there had been a movement to fire her for months before they actually did. So what I was going to ask you is, do you think that it's accurate to say that there's become a political divide that's tied to the fandom, and that that's why the arguments that Last Jedi defenders and Last Jedi critics are having are are characterized the way that they are?
So the only thing I'm gonna say is I'm not gonna get into the political aspect. I'm not well versed in that. Even if I was, I wouldn't want to talk about it. But I guess, yeah, I definitely think there could be some rooted
So
beliefs in
let me
the Last
clarify.
Jedi.
Separate
I
yourself
no
from
no
what.
I know
Yeah,
no
I'm not.
I know what you're saying, but I definitely think there are some rooted political morals when talking about certain films, especially The Last Jedi.
And you know what? I'll be honest with you. I don't need to disagree with what a movie is saying in order to dislike the way that it's delivered. I mean, I don't usually talk about this very much. My girlfriend is vegan. My daughter's vegetarian, or mostly vegetarian. Sometimes beef broth, but that's another thing entirely. She's young yet, and I'm actually at this point about 3/4 of the way to vegetarian, or at least plant based. And you'll find a family that you'd be hard pressed to find a family that is more for protecting animals than mine is. But I found the whole father thing in The Last Jedi completely ridiculous. I agree 100% with the message that they're giving, but the delivery of the message was just not done in a way that was conducive to story. And I feel like more than anything else, The Last Jedi prioritized message over delivery and story.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely fair. I mean, I will say, I know what you're talking about with Canto Bite, and some of the stuff there I have said when I talked to my friend about it. We just watched the film a couple weeks ago because I had a hard time watching that film when I was younger and more naive, I guess I would say. And I guess my original problems was it felt kind of on the nose with the rich
Exactly.
people. I like the subliminal messaging in Star Wars, with Anakin's story, slavery, the political messaging. It's there, but it felt a little on the nose to me, and I realized maybe it's because I'm getting older, and it's easier for me to pick up. And
I,
but
I think subtlety's
yeah,
better anyway, because I feel like the minute people feel preached to, the message really loses its potency.
right, yeah, I totally get that. It's gotten better for me, but like I I I don't. It's not really a massive complaint of mine. I understand what they were trying to do, but I think it's at its best when it's subliminal and it's hidden within
I
the movie.
I agree. And to bring the point home, the reason that I'm bringing this up is because I feel like what has happened a lot of times with the discussion, the pro versus anti Last Jedi people, is that the pro Last Jedi people have irreparably tied the message to the movie, to the point where if you are arguing against things in the movie, you must be arguing against the messages, which immediately makes it political for people. And it means that they have to defend it tooth and nail because they're not just defending a movie, they're defending their ideology through the movie. And my argument is I can separate myself. I agree with a lot of the messaging in The Last Jedi without liking the way it's delivered. And I don't see those two as inseparable.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I definitely think there is some subconscious, political beliefs that are uh, brought in when we talk about this film. And specifically for me, I don't fall on any side of the aisle, but there's problems I have with it. There's things I don't like about it. There's things I enjoy. And that's the same way I feel with every Star Wars movie or project. I think I really hate, and I guess I think the last topic I want to talk about that I just thought of is like, I've
Sure.
asked this question to multiple people, and I think it'd be interesting to talk to you about is the fandom as a whole. I hate how it's a two-sided thing now and how people have illustrated it as that. What do you think we could do to fix it?
That is always the golden question, isn't it? I think what has to happen is already starting to happen. Um, I'll say this, and I realize that this is going to slightly take us back into that topic that we didn't want to get into, but I'm bringing it up with purpose here. So, with I'm burdened with glorious purpose. Um, the beliefs that I was talking about in terms of Kathleen Kennedy and there being a divide at Lucasfilm. Um, I don't like to make an argument to authority, or it's actually not even the right fallacy. I don't like to say, well, a lot of people think that way, but a lot of the fan base does think that way. A lot of the fan base does see a potential divide between the creative teams at Lucasfilm. They see Kathleen Kennedy as the bad guy, and they see Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni as the knights in shining armor. Even if you ignore the sources, people associate Kathleen Kennedy with the things that she said and the politics that she has vocalized. And they see things like, the Mary Sue Ray, which I don't subscribe to that, by the way. Before we get into that, I actually love Ray as a character. But they all they see is like the Mary Sue Ray who has to be perfect. They see, Holdo doing what she does and the very, very strong feminist messaging in that movie. And then they see the return to the classic Star Wars with Luke wielding the lightsaber in The Mandalorian, and they say, oh my God, she's the devil, and these are the knights to protect us. That is unfortunately the way that part of the fandom is viewing things right now, for better or for worse, for good or for ill. The fact that it has been announced that Dave Filoni has been promoted to the creative director. Remember when we were talking about Kennedy and saying how she's better when she doles out responsibility, and when she tries to be creative, I think that's when she fails. It seems to me like she has made the choice to say, Filoni, you're going to be the one in that position who makes the creative decisions. And that's exactly what the fandom needed. I actually made 2 videos after that happened. One of them where I played devil's advocate for each side. One of them where I said, if you hate Kathleen Kennedy and you think she's the biggest problem in the fandom, boy, this is great news, because it means that Dave Filoni is going to be in charge of everything from now on, and you don't have to worry about her making creative decisions. And then I said, if you think that Kathleen Kennedy is the best thing to ever happen to the fandom, this is the best news ever, because now she has chosen the best person to make creative decisions going forward. I honestly think that Dave Filoni is the unifying factor that he's popular enough with both sides of the aisle here. And hopefully going forward, we're going to see more Star Wars content like we've gotten in the last, like with the Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett going forward. I've heard good things about the Bad Batch, although I haven't been able to sit down and watch it yet. I'm intending to stream it all together. And from what I understand too, he was promoted last summer, and it was just after that all of these exciting announcements came out about the different shows that they were working on, the Ahsoka show, the Rangers of the New Republic, all of these things. It's an exciting time because I think exactly what needs to happen to fix the fandom is happening.
Yeah, sure. I definitely acknowledge that point, but I think my point with the fandom is conversations like these. I think the thing that the fandom has lacked is conversation. Uh, and if there is any conversation, it's hostile, or it's through Twitter, and it's not in good avenues. When you talk to somebody face to face, you get the real side.
Yeah.
That's what I've always been taught or brought up with. Again, my co-host on the podcast that I run, me and him became best friends over a disagreement. Okay, we had a whole podcast about a disagreement, consider from one of my best friends now. Again, Choco. We had disagreement about we were talking about, I believe it was Ray and misogyny and sexism in the fandom, and we totally didn't disagree, but I had a different point than him on it, and we became good friends. I was on his podcast, and we've had that great relationship. And I wanted to bring you on because I feel like you would benefit from this type of platform a lot because TikTok doesn't allow you to go in depth on things and be more nuanced. So I guess these conversations are big and just content,
They
content,
are.
content. That's what Star Wars needs. Content. That way, there's positive things out there. Because every time there's not content, all the everything just goes to hell. After the Mandalorian, just everything went to hell. So yeah, that's my take on how we fix the fandom.
I think it can be both.
Right.
I do think that something needs to happen in the creative side, and I think that they made that move by taking fan favorite Filoni and putting him I can't speak right now, putting him in the position to make the creative decisions. That takes a lot of the ire off of Kathleen Kennedy. Whether she deserves that ire or not is irrelevant. The fact of the matter is that she put someone in the place to make those decisions that the fans pretty much universally are behind. And I do think that's going to guide these conversations going forward as well, because let's face it, we have a lot less arguments over The Mandalorian than we do over The Last Jedi. Um, I don't think that the kind of content that we're going to see with Filoni effectively in the position that Kennedy had before, at least as far as I can tell, um, I don't feel like it's going to be as divisive. I think the biggest argument that Filoni's going to get is that sometimes he plays it a little bit too safe, but I think that's what they need right now. And I think that as more content comes out that is less divisive, we're going to feel naturally less divided.
Yeah, I could totally see that. So
Conversation,
yeah,
though.
I mean, I don't really have anything else to say on this topic. So if you have anything else you want to bring up, go ahead.
I'm I'm good. I mean, I could do this all night, and I don't think that's what your viewers are going to want either. So
No, it's fine. So I guess if that's it, I'll wrap up. So yeah, guys, thank you for everybody who watched on Twitch. A special thing that I used to do, but I'm glad I got to have a conversation with you. So if you watched on Twitch, I appreciate it. If you were watching on YouTube, you'll probably be watching this on Sunday. Uh, I'll be back with my co-host Alex for Wars in the Stars on Wednesday. We're going to do some talk about the MCU a little bit, and we'll be back obviously next Friday to talk about Bad Batch episode 13. I want to thank Jedi Derelict for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation, and you're more than welcome if you want to ever hit me up to do a TikTok live or come on again. You're more than welcome to come on. So again, yeah, plug your social medias and tell them what you're going to do here in the future on TikTok.
I'm going to continue making the same kind of content that I've been making. I'd honestly like to get a little bit more away from The Last Jedi because I don't really want to be defined as the guy who bitches about Last Jedi all the time. It's just, it's. I made a video about this a little while ago. I love all Star Wars. There are things in The Last Jedi that I liked. There are just minor decisions that I disagreed with. And I talk about those a lot, and they end up sparking 18 more videos because everyone's got something to throw at me about it. But I love Star Wars. I want to talk about every aspect of it. I feel like once I watch the Bad Batch, I'll be able to like throw a little bit more in that's a little bit more relevant. But come find me on TikTok, the Jedi Derelict, and that's all I got for you.
Yeah, that's great. Guys, again, I'll be back next Wednesday here on Twitch at 8 p.m. Eastern, as always. So may the Force be with you all.